It's no secret that I'm a massive fan of SpiritSwap. The team there are building some of the most reliably awesome tools on the Phantom network. My early content on this channel actually caught their attention and they asked me to host their tutorial series where we've helped thousands of you onto the Phantom network through their platform. So I was thrilled when they offered to share a little bit of a behind the scenes look at the new V2 version of SpiritSwap that is moments away from release. So strap yourself in because this is going to be one of the most epic DeFi deep dives we've done on this channel. I'll be covering the ins and outs of what the V2 protocol encompasses and some of the exciting updates they have under the hood. So without further ado, let's dive in. SpiritSwap's V2 upgrade can be broken down into three categories: a complete rebuild of the codebase and a revamp of the entire UI, fundamental upgrades to the supporting smart contracts, protocol infrastructure and AMM architecture, and reallocation of fee distribution structure and gauge proxy emission ratio. Let's cover these upgrades in detail. Firstly, the complete rebuild of the codebase and revamp of the entire UI. As you may see, Soli has undergone some cosmetic surgery, some being an understatement. You'll notice the entire layout of the SpiritSwap application has changed for a more simplified, crisp, clean and professional look. The new user interface embodies that playful nature of Soli. The key elements are minimalistic, but they still offer the layer of detail that more seasoned DeFi users expect from a tier 1 DEX. There is a real flow to the experience. They've morphed the homepage, so it now doubles as your portfolio page. It gives a detailed overview of all your positions, including single held assets, LP positions, farm, win spirit, lending and borrowing, as well as ape mode positions. This was my go-to page on V1 because I can see all my assets across all the key features offered on the protocol. So it's great that they've brought this up front. I mentioned in some of our earlier deep dives on SpiritSwap that the V1 was a fork of the original Uni V2 codebase. This V2 codebase for SpiritSwap is 100% proprietary, meaning they've developed every inch of this new look from scratch. A monumental thing to achieve in 3 months. Let's quickly check some of the highlights. The UI now allows for multi-token LPs to be created, enabling multi-pools for stable swap integration. Farms are now separated out into multiple sections for various gauge proxies. Classic, automated market maker, stable automated market makers, permissionless farms, which we'll unpack later in this video. The new UI also goes deeper and gives you a more accurate understanding when looking at in-spirit stats. The in-spirit page is now a hub for bribes, offering protocols the ability to set up a bridge to their gauge directly within the in-spirit page, or subsequently for users to shortlist farms that are currently offering bribes and vote on them directly. The new bribe contract integrates directly within the in-spirit bribe UI, meaning users can now claim bribes they have participated in whilst claiming their weekly in-spirit distribution. Now, that's just on the surface, but I told you this thing has been taken apart and optimized piece by piece. So let's dive deeper into the supporting smart contracts, protocol infrastructure and AMM architecture. The most notable upgrade is the integration of a balancer style AMM, formerly known as a stable swap. StableSwap provides a mechanism to create cross markets for stablecoins in a way which could be called Uniswap with leverage. It is a fully autonomous market maker for stablecoins with very minimal slippage, as well as an efficient fiat savings account for liquidity providers on the other side. I had a chance to chat to the team and their reasoning for adding this additional AMM to their protocol architecture came down to 3 things. Supporting incentivization of their lending network, recognize the importance of offering frictionless swaps for stablecoins in a decentralized marketplace, and peg support for SpiritSwap's Win Spirit partner LPs, for example, Lin, Bin, Rain Spirit, Spirit LPs. So with their lending network, they've always seemed to face a little bit of difficulty in how to incentivize it with maximum efficiency. Previously, SpiritSwap has been incentivizing lending and borrowing via treasury funds through the Rainmaker contract, but it wasn't cost effective. So they've decided to add a stable AMM into the mix. A stable AMM now enables SpiritSwap to restructure how the lending network is incentivized. Any pools that are not currently utilized by the AMM itself will be now used for the lending network. This means the lending network itself is actually incentivized by the pools it pools liquidity from. This way, if the AMM isn't using your liquidity and not earning you any fees, the lending network will tap into these funds and enable you to profit one way or another. It squashes the dreaded dormant liquidity issue. This is an ingenious way to squeeze every drop of profitability out of user capital. With this AMM architecture offering stable peg support, it also means SpiritSwap can now give more effective output on stable trades. But it also offers partner win Spirit pairs a more targeted solution to peg functionality. As someone with a sizable position in these pairs, this is huge. With this integration, WinSpirit pairs will now have a much more effective peg, as demonstrated by the current LinSpirit Spirit pair on Beethoven. This will now entice WinSpirit pairs to stay where they belong and retain profitability. Avoiding the de-pegging of these pairs caused by sell-offs mean InSpirit holders won't miss out on the fees captured by any trading of InSpirit pairs that are currently based on other AMMs. By offering a more competitive output delivery on stable pairs, SpiritSwap will be more competitive in the aggregator space, which means better returns for its users. My very first vid on SpiritSwap was an intro into their bridge, so it's dear to my heart. The Spirit Bridge now opens the floodgates, effectively turning it into a bridge aggregator, supporting swaps across every EVM chain imaginable and pumping more capital into the protocol. Also, another cool upgrade to the bridge is the fact that swaps can now be made in tandem with bridging. This is something I've been craving as I've been leaving the platform to go to something like multi-chain for this feature. But now, for example, you can bridge BNB on BSC to SPIRIT on FTM. This effectively makes Spirit Bridge a cross-chain, cross-asset swap platform. The lucrative InSpirit model has seen InSpirit holders relish in bribes offered by protocols who want to bolster their gauge with sustainable emissions. Within the first 3 weeks of bribes going live, InSpirit holders were bribed in excess of $282,000 worth of tokens. The Spirit bribe wars do not look like slowing down. Running snapshots and facilitating airdrops for these bribes takes a lot of work behind the scenes. It's dev time that could be going to other parts of the protocol. So they've simplified the bribe process for both developers and community. Developers of projects who have gauges with SpiritSwap can now offer a bribe and set this up directly within the InSpirit UI. And InSpirit holders who participate in bribes can also collect their bribes directly within the InSpirit page at the end of each distribution block, along with their InSpirit rewards. Another big bonus for developers is incorporating farming as a service to the ecosystem pools. This allows any developer to incentivize their own liquidity. If these pools do well and generate good volume for InSpirit holders, these farms may get promoted to gauges at a later stage. With this function, budding developers can set up their own farm on SpiritSwap in a permissionless manner. The incentive for the developer here is that this initial farm, incentivized by the protocol in question, could eventually lead to a SpiritSwap incentivized gauge if the farm does well and generates good fees for the community. Now, let's talk about the reallocation of the fee distribution structure and gauge proxy emission ratio. To be more aggressive and competitive in the DeFi space, SpiritSwap recognized they need to change fees and change gauge emission allocation. They've changed the allocation of fees in 3 areas: classic AMM gauges, stable AMM gauges, and permissionless farms. So let's look at classic AMM gauges. SpiritSwap will be reducing fees from 0.3% to 0.2% for the classic AMM and establishing an even more competitive fee of 0.1% for the new stable AMM. They're really taking on the aggregator traffic with this update, making it more lucrative for their fee earners. Of the 0.2% fee collected, 25% will go to the base fee It's exactly the same as the current in-spirit distribution. This means increasing in-spirit distributor rewards from 16.6% of the fee to 25% of the fee. These are rewards that all in-spirit holders collect. Another 25% of the fees will go to the new protocol fee model. It's a rebate for protocols who list LPs with SpiritSwap, for example, Liquid Driver. Out of all the fees collected on Liquid Driver's liquidity pools, 25% of these will be given back to the protocol who lists with SpiritSwap. This incentive will be an enticement to new and emerging protocols looking to launch on Phantom. It will see SpiritSwap capture a much larger allocation of liquidity provision, as it is an extra revenue model for protocols. This incentivizes protocols to add more liquidity with SpiritSwap, which deepens liquidity. Deeper liquidity on the exchange means more optimal trade output. More optimal trade output means more trades going through SpiritSwap routers, which in turn means more fees collected. This establishes a positive feedback loop of liquidity provided versus fees collected by the protocol. This positive feedback loop is further supercharged as it's expected this 25% protocol fee distributed to each respective protocol will be used as protocol-owned liquidity to farm more Spirit. Now, a little bit of insight from the team is that they expect this positive feedback loop is further charged as it's expected 25% of protocol fees distributed to each respective protocol will be used as protocol-owned liquidity to farm more Spirit. They expect these protocols will then use the Spirit farmed to lock up for in-Spirit, and then use that in-Spirit to further boost their gauges. This is a win for the SpiritSwap ecosystem, a win for the protocols involved, and a win for SpiritSwap users due to deeper liquidity. To collect this fee, each protocol who lists with SpiritSwap must reach out to them to establish a chain of communication and provide a multi-sig controlled wallet to accept this weekly fee. In the event that a protocol does not reach out to register to receive this fee, the fee will be diverted back to the LP reward APR until the protocol in question registers. The final 50% of fees will go to the voting fee model. The voting fee model borrows from the solidly model and applies to SpiritSwap's metrics. The voting fee is exactly the same as the base fee. However, fees earned from this model are only paid to people who voted on the gauges that this LP represents. For example, if you voted 100% of your gauge voting weight to an LP that has high volume, you will receive more Spirit in your weekly distribution. This is because you are reaping the rewards of high volume LP. The voting fee is exactly the same as the base fee. However, fees earned from this model are only paid to the people who voted on the gauges that this LP represents. For example, if you voted 100% of your gauge voting weight to an LP that has high volume, you will receive more Spirit in your weekly distribution. This is because you are reaping the rewards of a high volume LP. The reason behind this upgrade is to try and distribute votes more evenly among critical LPs that need good emission incentives. This is in order to offer deeper liquidity to critical pairs like USDC Phantom. This disincentivizes concentrated emissions on low volume pairs, as votes on low volume pairs will not reap any rewards as the pair is underachieving in volume, which is not beneficial to the protocol as a whole. This approach strives to achieve a few things. It establishes deeper liquidity for core pairs that are important to the growth of SpiritSwap's ecosystem. There's less concentration of votes on low volume gauges, and it distributes votes to pairs that warrant higher emission rewards. It also rewards users who vote with the protocol's best interests at heart, rather than blanket profiteering. Now, it's important to note of the LPs that don't have a gauge, for example, a permissionless farm LP, this 50% voting fee will be reverted back to the LP rather than going to the Spirit Maker contract. The stable AMM fee structure is a little more simplistic. Of the 0.01% fees collected, 50% will go to the base fee. This fee is exactly the same as the current in-Spirit distribution, meaning in-Spirit holders will be receiving 50% of all fees collected from stable swaps. The other 50% will go to the LPs. It's the same as the current concept. 50% will go directly to liquidity pool providers. For example, if someone swaps $1,000 of USDC DAI, 5 cents will go to users supplying the USDC DAI LP. Now let's talk about the permissionless farm fee structure. Falling under the classic AMM category, a 0.2% fee will be charged on all swaps for permissionless farm LPs or any LPs that aren't supported by gauges. 25% will go to the base fee, 25% of fees will go to the new protocol fee model, meaning protocols who incentivize their own liquidity on the SpiritSwap DEX will be rewarded and incentivized to do so with fee reward incentives. And then the final 50% will go to LPs, as a gauge vote fee is not applicable to LPs that are not supported by gauges. Finally, in this section, let's talk about gauge emissions. There will be 5 separate gauge proxies established moving forward. Each gauge will hold the following weight of emission distribution percentage each week during the weekly distributor epic reset. Boosted farm gauges will receive 45% of all Spirit emissions each week moving forward. This means that out of all Spirit rewards due to be distributed to each respective gauge proxy, 45% will be distributed among boosted farms. These emissions will then be divided among each respective boosted farm gauge, depending on the weekly vote they get from in-Spirit holders. Stable farm gauges will receive 20% of the emissions. This means that out of all Spirit emissions distributed each week by the Master Chef contract, 20% will be allocated to gauges for stable farms. These allocations will then be divided among each respective boosted farm gauge, depending on the weekly vote they get from in-Spirit holders. The Spirit Phantom Special Gauge will receive 20% of the emissions. 20% of the emissions from the Master Chef will be sent to a singular gauge proxy, specifically dedicated to the Spirit Phantom LP. The reason behind this is to ensure emissions and incentives for this crucial pair are controllable and consistent. The reason a singular gauge for this pair was established rather than a separate farm is to ensure the boost factor for this pair can still be offered. 10% of emissions from the Master Chef will be sent to another singular gauge proxy, specifically dedicated to the USDC Phantom LP. The reason for setting up a second singular gauge proxy for this pair is again to ensure that this LP gets a consistent and controllable flow of incentives. This is the most critical pair any DEX can establish on Phantom, hence why having consistent emissions are important. The final 5% of emissions from the Master Chef will go to the 5th and final gauge proxy, specifically dedicated to WinSpirit LPs. Isolating these pairs is important as it allows for sufficient incentivification and fair competition whilst also protecting incentive flow of stable LPs. So the new gauge model is dynamic, meaning the numbers can shift around if the community votes to do so. However, it's clear that the SpiritSwap team has placed a lot of deep consideration into these numbers and carefully planned what the best is for the DEX and the protocol to preserve emission allocations where they are needed and allow for fair competition. Whoa. This V2 rollout is mega. Each element has clearly had heaps of time put into its development. It's like they've taken every piece of user feedback and data and asked themselves, how can we make this better? This is what I love about Web3. The speed of iteration is unlike anything we've seen in the technology space. And what's even better is that us as users are firmly in the center. Chatting with the SpiritSwap team, they told me that because the V2 codebase is entirely proprietary, updates and further development can be expected to be far quicker and efficient. I've even heard that there is a bunch of items in the backlog that they are ready to roll out for version 2.5, so stay tuned for more updates. This one has been huge. If you've listened through to here, let me assure you, you are going to make it. We're on a mission to demystify DeFi in these deep dives, so I hope you've taken something from this video. Please make sure you like and subscribe because it really helps me and the team at Digital Twin bring to you the best of DeFi, GameFi, and all the fun things happening in the world of Web3. See you next time.